Okay. So yeah, thank you all for being here today. And as I just said, this will be recorded. It will be available on our website for future reference. If throughout this presentation you would like captions, if you go to the bottom of your screen, there's an ellipses, and if you click on that, you'll get options for captions to come up on your own computer. Throughout the presentation, feel free to ask questions. You can just start talking. You can raise your hand. There's also the chat feature if you would like to use that instead. So I'm gonna share my screen and we can get started on the presentation. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? Cool, great. So again, welcome to today's workshop. So this is going to be the outline for how this presentation will go today. I'll start off with introducing ourselves, so the staff at Humanities DC, and a little bit about what we do as an organization. Then I'll go into detail about the visions opportunity. Then we'll ask for everyone in the room to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what project you are thinking of. And then we'll go into a deep dive into the actual application, section by section. And then there will be a final Q&A, but again, there will be opportunities for Q&A throughout the presentation. And again, if you have a question in the moment, you're more than welcome to just ask. So we can start off with introductions of staff at Humanities DC. My name is Hillary Steen, and I am one of the community grants managers. I am your main point of contact for any questions related to the Visions Grant. And Leah, can you introduce yourself?
Yep, my name's Leah Gage. I'm the other community grants manager, and I'm also available to answer any questions around grants.
Great. And Loy, can you introduce yourself?
Off mute. Hello, everyone. I'm Loy Nemar, Director of Grant Making and Programs at Humanities DC. Thanks for your interest in this grant opportunity.
Great. So as you all continue to move through the application process, our names will pop up frequently. Again, I will probably be the person who you'll be interacting with the most, but Leah and Loy are definitely available, and you might hear from them as well. So Humanities DC helps all Washingtonians and others connected to the district deepen their relationships with the city and each other through the sharing of unique and universal stories, the fostering of intellectual stimulation, and the promotion of cross-cultural understanding. So to do this, we do both community-informed grant making as well as partnership-based public programming. On our website, we have a lot of information available for our fabulous public programs. I'm sure that some of you have been to our programs before as well. We're going to obviously talk about the grant making side, but I do encourage you to also look into our programs. So in 2024, we expect to award $1 million in grants across 6 grant programs. So that will be approximately 62 grants in total, again, across those 6 grant programs. So in cycle 1, which constitutes 4 of our grant programs, that cycle opened up in mid-December, and applications will close on February 20th. Visions is part of cycle 1. And then cycle 2, for the 2 final grant programs we have, that application process will open on March 4th and close on May 1st. And I want to show a little bit, if I can. Okay. All right, so this is the Humanities DC webpage. I'm sure some of you are already very familiar with it, but I want to walk you through one webpage in particular that will be very helpful for you as you go through the application process. So it's our main website. If you go to Community Grants and then go to Grant Opportunities, And this is all the grant opportunities. So if you scroll down, there's a lot of information here. I won't go into everything, but this is where you'll find information, links to particular web pages for all 6 of our grant opportunities. Visions is the one down here, and this is where you'll be able to find the RFP, so the request for proposal, as well as more vision-specific information for your reference. And going down here is information about grant workshops. So we have done 4 grant-specific workshops for the 4 Cycle 1 grant opportunities. This is the last one. And we will also continue to do in-person information sessions if you are interested in learning more about all 6 opportunities that we have in 2024. Next is applicant resources. I'll be coming back to this box in a little bit. This is where you would find a link to Foundant and Foundant instructions. Foundant is our grants portal, so that is where you will actually be submitting your application. There's also an FAQ document that is very helpful, and it provides some general tips to anyone who wants to apply for funding, as well as a link to sign up for office hours. Office hours will allow you to have a one-on-one meeting with myself or Leah to go over individual questions. We are also totally happy to talk you through which grant opportunity we think might be the best place for you to apply if you don't really have an idea about which particular grant program to apply to. So yeah, you can sign up for office hours and have a one-on-one meeting with myself or Leah. And then scrolling down is more information about the 6 grant opportunities. And then at the very bottom is the full list of our current grantees. You can peruse this at your leisure. You can see that there is a wide variety of different projects that we fund. Obviously, your own project does not have to align with any of these, but it just provides a nice overview of everything that we do fund. And then going back to the PowerPoint. All right, so humanities, DC has the word humanities in the title. And before I talk about how we define the humanities, I was hoping that people on the call might offer their own suggestions. So what do you think the humanities are? If you have ideas or your own definition, feel free to just shout it out or put it in the chat. What do you think the humanities are?
I'll jump in. I think the humanities are disciplines like literature, history, sort of the study of how we live and sort of how we got to where we are. Not necessarily quantitative, but more kind of qualitative. That's trying to sort of get at the truth of human experience.
Mm-hmm. Great. Anyone else?
Well, definitely the arts.
The arts is an interesting suggestion. I'll go into that a little bit after once you see the definition. Anyone else?
I think they're a way to bring people together, sort of that shared human experience.
Mm-hmm. All right, so these are some great definitions. Thank you for those who offered some. So human stories are basically the humanities, and human stories allow us to navigate the complexities of our past, present, and future. The humanities help us learn, empathize, and challenge our assumptions. They are a compass for interpreting what humans make and exploring what makes us human. So this is a very broad definition, definitely. But if it helps define the term the humanities a little bit closer, there are specific disciplines that are within the humanities. So they help us understand our stories past through specific disciplines such as history, anthropology, and archaeology. They help us understand our stories' expressions through disciplines such as literature, linguistics, languages, arts, history, theory, and criticism. And they also help us understand our story's values through ethics, philosophy, comparative religion, and law. And so I'm sorry I didn't see the name pop up on my screen, but the arts was mentioned as part of the humanities, which is a very good guess. But actually, the arts are separate from the humanities, although they are very much related. So we do not fund the arts just for performance sake or for the goal of artistic expression. We fund artistic expression if they provide a conduit to the humanities or they're a way of expressing them. So as you can see on here, arts history, arts theory, arts criticism is definitely allowable for us to fund. But any arts outputs that you do have to be humanistic in nature. I know it's a pretty blurry distinction between the two. So with that in mind, are there any questions right now about the definition of the humanities before I continue moving forward? All right.
I have one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Does journalism fall within the humanities within your definition here?
It definitely can. Yeah. We actually have a community journalism program ourselves. So yeah, journalism can definitely work within this definition.
Okay, thanks.
All right. So now specifically about this particular opportunity, which is Visions. So Visions, this opportunity is for the creation or continuation of innovative interpretations of humanities scholarship for wide public audiences. So these are broad scale outputs such as documentary films, festivals or conferences, curricula, tours, or exhibits. The project period for this opportunity is from May 1st, 2024 through April 30th of 2025. And it is only open to DC-based nonprofit organizations. If you're an individual or an informal group without 501c3 status, you can still be a part of this program, but you have to apply through a fiscal sponsor because, again, this opportunity is only open to DC-based nonprofit organizations. And I'll explain what a fiscal sponsor is a little bit later in this presentation. The maximum award is $25,000, and all applications must include a community expert or scholar. So this is someone with some kind of expertise in what you are trying to accomplish. It could be someone in academia who has formal training in the topic or the kind of output that you would like for this kind of grant opportunity, or it could be someone with lived experience, or it could be someone with more informal understanding of the topic. So don't worry about the word scholar. It's definitely a flexible definition. We just want someone who has some kind of expertise on what you're trying to do. In 2024, we will fund approximately 18 Visions projects, and the application is due on February 20th, 2024. And in 2023, Visions was actually our most competitive programs grant. We expect to continue to get a lot of applications within this grant opportunity. People are really excited about what they can do with this kind of opportunity. So just keep in mind that it is a very competitive grant opportunity. And I encourage you to take a look at all of the different grant opportunities that we have. Obviously, if you believe that your project is best suited for Visions, then definitely apply. But I do encourage you to take a look at all of the opportunities because again, Visions is one of the more competitive opportunities that we have. And so I said earlier about fiscal sponsors, so I just want to explain that a little bit more. So fiscal sponsors are 501c3 nonprofit organizations that would sponsor an individual or community group without 501c3 status. Fiscal sponsors assume all financial and legal obligations of the grant. So they're the ones who would actually submit the application. They would be the ones to formally accept any funding, and they would also be the ones to submit the interim and the final reports. I'll get into reporting later in this presentation, but basically they're the ones, again, who assume all financial and legal obligations. The individuals who are actually doing the project would work with the fiscal sponsors for all of these obligations and requirements for the grant. You are allowed to budget funds that would go directly to the fiscal sponsor. No more than 10% of the total grant award may be used to pay the fiscal sponsor. Later in this presentation, as I go through the budget, you can see exactly where you would explain this cost in your application. But if, for example, you're requesting $25,000, 10% of that is $2,500. So you would be able to pay $2,500 to the fiscal sponsor for any fees that they have as they work on the obligations for your project. If you are applying through a fiscal sponsor, then that fiscal sponsor, again, is the one that would actually submit the application through Foundant. And so the fiscal sponsors organization, the application would be submitted through their organization, not you as the individual who will actually be doing the project. Some fiscal sponsors are more involved with the project than others. So it really depends on what kind of relationship you would like to have. All the eligibility requirements that are noted in the RFP, the request for a proposal, still do apply to the fiscal sponsors. Any questions about fiscal sponsorship right now? May?
Can 501c4s be a fiscal sponsor?
No, they have to be 501c3s.
Okay, just checking.
Good question. And so, like I said earlier, the website has a full list of all of the grantees that we have, but wanted to provide two examples that are Visions grantees that we have this year. So one grantee is Cultural DC. They had a project called Torrance, New Links to Black Futures, which was a multi-day festival, which gathered together creative people from all different areas around the development of Black cross-diasporic futures through visual arts, music, film performances, multi-day festival. Then another grantee that we have is the Capital Jewish Museum, and their project was around their exhibit, Notorious RBG, The Life and Times of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And the grant allowed them to have community days that were open to the public. One was focused on families. One was a closer look at the themes of the exhibition. And the last one was an art making activity about inspiring action. And so now I want to take a pause a little bit and open it up to the whole Zoom room. We have a really great group of people here today. So if you can just go around the room and say your name, your organization affiliation, if you have at this point, and tell us a little bit about the project you're considering and how you think that it's connected to the humanities. Because we have a pretty large group on the call right now, it would be great if you could have a brief introduction. Feel free to just start talking, raising your hand, or putting your information into the chat.
I can try if you want to. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. My name is Pablo Picon. I work with District Coalition, and we are trying to put classical music together with Coco this year in a festival in DC. So we want to talk about why there are like some music that it looks appropriate for the intellect and why it's appropriate for the body. And if we can put those two words together in a festival. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shall I just speak?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, sorry to do it, I guess. Hi, my name is Deirdre Evans Pritchard, and I run the DC Independent Film Festival. It's been in the city for a long time. However, this actual project is would probably have that as the fiscal sponsor, because it's actually an independent project that I'm working on with some photographers here in Washington, DC. But it is in the photography camera world. Nice to meet you all. Why is it connected to the humanities? Well, cameras were created by human beings to take pictures of human beings.
I'll jump in. My name's Diana Jean Shemo, and I'm the founder and director of the Double Exposure Investigative Film Festival, which is a film festival and a professional conference around investigative filmmaking, and it will be in its 10th season this year. So our project is it's all built around sort of investigative journalism and visual storytelling and largely documentary films. So it's kind of in the humanities camp there. And I think that our kind of specific focus for this would be support to bring professors, journalists, subject area experts around the subjects that the films are tackling in as speakers, and to provide stipends for them to take part in the festival as speakers. So it's kind of I think that's how it's connected to the humanities, and drawing on the expertise of local writers, professors, filmmakers, etc.
Leia, I do see people have been raising their hand. I don't see the whole list. If you can call on people, please.
Yep. Yeah, go ahead, Laurel.
Hi, I'm Laurel McFarland. I'm on the board of the Alliance for the Civil War, to protect the defense of Washington. And we are, every year, we celebrate in July, and this year it will be July 1864, the 160th anniversary of the Battle of Fort Stevens, when 15,000 rebels nearly captured the Capitol. And we like connecting in a one-day event of speakers and performances, help people understand their deep connection to their ancestors, Black, white, military, civilian, who kept the rebels from capturing the Capitol. And we tell that story at Fort Stevens in DC.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Tony.
Hi, everyone. My name's Tony. I'm with Georgetown Heritage. We are a National Park Service Friends group supporting the C&O Canal in Georgetown. And we're thinking about possibly two projects, one of which would be some walking tours of the canal and historic Georgetown area that we're putting on with a focus on supporting youth field trips to this tour. And then the other one would be a community event that would bring the Georgetown and broader DC community together for a family fun event that would also feature a lot of historical programming from our walking tours. So connected to spreading the history of the C&O Canal to all of Washington and beyond.
Great.
And then Brian, I think you had raised your hand.
I have.
Go ahead,
Hang
please.
on. Hang on. I'm trying to start my video.
No worries. Take your time.
That's funny. It says the host has stopped my video. I don't know why.
Oh,
I'm sorry for the delay. I'm trying to start it and it says, oh,
We
here we go.
can hear you.
Yeah, there we go.
much
Sorry,
needed
my
to you.
apologies. I kept trying to I disappeared. Anyway, hello everyone. Sorry for that technical delay. My name's Brian Baird. I'm the founder and chair of the National Museum and Center for Service. Our mission is to create a nationwide network of installations to honor service in all its forms. The relationship to humanities is that I don't know of anything more fundamental to humanity than our spirit of service to one another. But ironically, there is no installation or museum anywhere in the United States that honors all forms of service. So we're partnering with the Washington, D.C. Public Library, Washington, D.C. Rotary, Washington, D.C. YMCA to create a prototype exhibition to honor and tell the stories of service as it's happening throughout Washington, D.C. And this is meant to be an initial effort, a combination of exhibitions and programming to highlight all the wonderful ways people are serving in DC, and that will hopefully be a prototype for other exhibitions within DC and then actually eventually around the country. Thanks for the opportunity to share.
Thank you.
go ahead, Gil.
Hi, so I'm Jill Tong-Perky. I'm the coordinator of the Washington, D.C. International Film Festival. And some of our films, we take some filmmakers to schools to debate with students. That's how it's related to humanities. But our project is at the end of April, so I don't know if it's actually I don't know how it works and if it's gonna be able to, since it says the project has to begin on May 1st. I don't know if it's gonna work out, but I have some questions about that, but anyways, yep. That's it.
Thanks. We had a couple people in the chat, May O'Brien from Washington, D.C. Rotary Club and the D.C. Rotary Foundation interested in developing the exhibits and programming at D.C. Public Library. And Gimbia Kettering, a DC resident and writer applying as an individual to support a book about the impact of the January 6th insurrection on us, DC residents, especially in Ward 6 and 7.
Okay, great. So yeah, that's a fantastic array of potential projects and very exciting. And to answer a previous question, we can chat more about this later about when the project actually has to happen. And you're correct, because the project period starts May 1st. We would not be able to fund activities that happen before May 1st. But perhaps there could be follow-up events, for example, that would happen during the project period. And we can talk further about that later. So there are 2 required reports if you get funding for this opportunity. One is the interim report that is due on October 15th. And this report is relatively small, relatively quick. It's where you would explain how and where you've spent funds so far compared to the budget that you submit in your application, and also provide a brief overview of what you've been able to do so far, any challenges you've had so far, things like that. And then the final report is due on May 30th of 2025. And this is where you would explain how you spent all of the funds and provide documentation of all of your expenditures. So that would be any receipts, invoices, timesheets, if that's applicable to your project, things like that. as well as a full project evaluation. And the final report is definitely more detailed than the interim report, but wanted to let everyone know nice and early that there are two required reports, the interim and the final. All right. So next is about allowable and unallowable costs. So this grant can fund wages, honoraria, supplies, equipment, any virtual presenting platforms, rentals for space, transportation, publicity and promotion, and up to 10% of the full award can go towards a fiscal sponsor. But on this slide, I especially want to emphasize the right-hand side about what this grant program cannot fund. So Vision's funding cannot fund any non-program related costs, which might include rent, overhead or indirect, utilities, building restoration, general office supplies for the whole organization. This program also does not fund any food or beverages, entertainment, social activities, or fundraisers. And so I know a lot of you are thinking of perhaps an event or a conference or a festival. So definitely pay attention to this part because we would not fund food and beverages, for example. This program also does not fund tuition and scholarships, debt reduction, regranting, or funding to government agencies. So before I go into more detail about the application itself, are there any questions?
Go ahead, Gerardo.
Thank you. I saw the issue about the project evaluation that's included in the final report. Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Sure. So that evaluation will be how the project director, so the person who is the lead on the project, thought how the project went. So did the project achieve the goals that were noted in the application? Were there any challenges? What was the impact of the project on DC and on the audience that perhaps attended the event? I'll go into some, I talked a little bit about the project scholar. So the project scholar has their own evaluation and how they thought the project went about. The project director would talk about what the relationship was like with the project scholar, any feedback from audience members, things like that.
In the application, there's an area where you'll kind of define what success means to you in the project. So what is the impact you're hoping to achieve? And it could be as simple as the number of people you're hoping to attend. Maybe it goes farther to include a survey or something like that. But that's how you'll address program evaluation in the reports.
Thank you.
I have a question. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
Super, thank you. So I know that sometimes there are restrictions on equipment. We're planning an exhibition, and I'm wondering if there is a limit on the kind of things we can ask for.
There's not, no, there are no limitations on equipment as long as the equipment that you purchase is program specific.
Okay, super, thank you.
Yeah, and really for any of the budget categories, there's no limitation on like, oh, you can only ask for a certain dollar amount for salaries or for travel, for example. It's really how much you determine is necessary for each of the budget category. The only limitation we really have is for the fiscal sponsor fee, which again is 10% of the total award provided.
Go ahead, Brian.
If we have multiple partners, as I described earlier, I'm assuming that the grant would come under the aegis of one of the partners, and then the others would be continue to participate, but the management of the grant itself and the application would originate with just one of the partners, or do you need some formal buy-in from all participating groups?
So the application would come from one entity, but there is a part of the application where you list key personnel and talk about any partnerships you have. You don't need any formal agreements with potential partners for the application, although you are, of course, welcome to submit that as well. But yeah, the application will come from one organization.
And thank you. A second question is, do the designated scholars / experts have to have a personal residence in DC, or can they be from the greater metropolitan area, or even maybe a former resident from DC? We've got all of the above covered if we need them. I'm just trying to understand that.
Yeah, the scholar does not have to live in DC.
Thank you.
And in the application, you would explain a little bit about the scholar and their work experience and why they're the best person to be a scholar, but they do not have to reside in DC.
We have a question. Is there a requirement for counterpart funds or a percentage match?
No.
No, yeah, go ahead.
We do not require matching. You are welcome, and this will be clear when I go into the actual application, but you are allowed to list other sources of funding if you have, but that is not necessary, and we do not require any matching.
Diana asked, what is the actual role of the scholar?
It's a good question. That is pretty flexible. We have some language about that in the RFP, but the scholar could do anything from research or help research the topic area. If you have a panel discussion, they could be the moderator. It's really up to you. There aren't any particular limitations or anything like that for the scholar.
We also have a question. Oh,
Leah, is there
sorry.
anything you wanted to add about that question?
No, I don't think so. No, I think yeah. The scholar can take on many roles. We have a question from Gimbia. As an individual applicant, am I my own humanities expert?
So this opportunity is only open to organizational applicants. But if you end up getting a fiscal sponsor and you are the one in charge of the project, then you could be the project director. The project scholar can also be the project director. That is totally allowed. You do not have to have an external person. If you think that you are the best person to lead the project, to be the scholar, you can put yourself down. You would just explain why you think you're the best person.
And our colleague Loy added, the role of the scholar is to ensure your project is well-grounded in the humanities and the subject matter of your project. So the scholar is somebody who's well-versed in that subject matter, whether that's an academic expert with formal training or a community member who has lived experience. Go ahead, Brian.
Thank you. As I looked through the criteria, the evaluation criteria for the applicants, if I remember correctly, the first criteria had to do with the sort of the managerial infrastructure. Can you talk a little bit about that? What kind of things you're looking for? What things to highlight, et cetera? I mean, obviously, presumably you wanted to make sure we can handle the money and do it so responsibly. But can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, and I will later in this presentation as we go through the actual
super
application questions. Yep.
Great. Thanks, Hillary.
Mm-hmm. Right. So yeah, great questions, everyone.
For additional questions to be answered, is there an email address where we could send those questions?
Yeah, of course. Leah, if you can put the grants email into the chat, It's grants@humanitiesdc.org, and that would go to the grants team generally, and we'll be able to answer your questions from there. So now I'm going to dive into the actual application. So a little bit about the grant review process. So we have a group of external grant reviewers who are the ones to actually comb through your applications. These are people with strong connections to the humanities in DC. And while us on staff review all applications that come in to check for eligibility, so for example, we check your 501c3 registration, it's really the grant reviewers who will be looking at the answers to the questions that you provide in your application. And it's really based off of their feedback that is how we determine who gets funded. So as I go into what makes an application successful and also common application issues, these are things that the reviewers have told us directly, as well as, you know, us on staff as we've gone through this process to see what works and what doesn't work very well. If you are interested in the grant review process further, that information is on our website. Grant applicants are allowed to also review grants. It's a $250 stipend for completing the whole review process. You would just not be reviewing applications in the same grant program that you are applying to. So what makes a successful application includes the following. So applications have a strong connection to the humanities as a whole, as well as specifically for DC residents. Just because an event happens in DC doesn't necessarily mean that it is really connected to DC residents. So it's important to say how your project connects to both the humanities and the people who live in our city. Was someone going to ask a question just now? All right. Another element of a successful application is that the scholar seems qualified and you clearly explain what role they will take in your project. So based off of what Loy said earlier, as well as what we said earlier during the presentation, the person has to have a connection to the humanities and you explain what they will actually be doing for your project. Another element is that there are clear ideas and explanations for who your community partners will be, who your team members will be, as well as any outreach that you plan to do for the community. For this part of the application, as well as many other parts, you don't need to have everything completely set in stone by the time you submit your application, but you should definitely have ideas as to who you would like to be involved in your project, how you want to reach out to them, if there are organizations that you hope to work with, different communities around the city, for example, just have an idea about who you would like to work with. Another element is that the timeline seems reasonable. So you will get a year for this project period. And for our current grantees, the ones that are doing events, most of those events happen in the second half of the project period because the first half is all the preparation for it. That doesn't necessarily have to be the case, but as you are figuring out the actual timeline of when you hope to achieve certain milestones, just be aware about your own organization's capacity, the project director's capacity, things like that. If you think that you'll be able to finish your project within, I don't know, 2 months, that's totally fine, as long as you explain how you think you can finish your project in that period of time. Another element of successful applications is that there are thoughtful ways that you will look at success. We don't say that you have to have surveys or anything like that. It's really how you think you will be successful and ways that you will be able to measure that success and explain that very clearly. And another element of a successful application is that the budget is well explained in the budget narrative. Again, when I go into the actual application questions, you'll see how it all looks. But everything that's in the budget has to be explained clearly in the budget narrative. And it's great if you have that budget narrative be very well organized. So if you have salary in your budget, you can write the word salary and then explain the dollar amount. If you have travel, write the word travel and then explain it. And that just allows the reviewers to be able to quickly be able to match the numbers in your budget versus your budget narrative. And the biggest piece of advice that I give to all applicants is that you should be as detailed as possible in your application. It is good to assume that the grant reviewers have no idea what your organization does. They don't know about the topic that you're looking at. Anything like that, basically. They won't know acronyms, they won't know slang terms. So we do encourage applicants to have someone else read their application before you submit it. Us at Humanities DC can read your draft application if you submit it at least a week before the application deadline. We would review your application based on how complete it is. If we think that you answered the questions detailed enough and in full, things like that. So provide as many details as you possibly can at the time of submission. And then as a mirror to that, there are some common application issues that reviewers have brought up to us, which mirrors the previous slide. So the applicant would not explain why the project is important to DC residents, for example. The activities that they hope to do seem unrelated to the purpose and scope of the project. What they hope to achieve with the project does not align with what activities they're hoping to do. Another is that there are unclear descriptions of who you're working with and how you are choosing them. Just saying that you hope to work with 2 filmmakers, for example, that's pretty vague. Who are those filmmakers? Where do you hope to reach out to get these filmmakers, for example? Also, the scholar might seem unqualified, so perhaps they have no connection to the humanities, for example. So definitely make sure to explain the expertise of your scholar and why they're the best person to work with you on that project. Another element is that the budget is not justified in the budget narrative. So there are dollar amounts listed in the budget that have no reflection in the budget narrative. Numbers don't add up correctly, things like that. That's just confusing for the reviewers. This application, I know that some of you have already looked at the application questions, and you can see that, you know, there are different questions to answer, and it will take some time to actually read through it. The deadline is February 20th, so if you can start now, or if you have started already, that's fantastic. Definitely take your time in writing this application, because reviewers will know if you wrote it the day before, or they'll probably know, depending on how good you are as a writer, I guess. Another element is that the timeline is too vague. We totally understand that you might not have like particular dates for all of your milestones, but if you could even say like, you hope to do this by this month, or you will do this in the late fall, things like that. Again, provide as many details as possible, because the biggest problem that reviewers provide feedback on is that the application is not detailed enough.
We had a couple thoughts and questions in the chat. a question around how we can review the applications when they're saved as drafts. We encourage you to go ahead and complete the application in the grant management system, which Hillary will show you in a second, and save it as a draft. And then email us at grants@humanitiesdc.org and we can take a look at it. And then there's also a question around word and character limits for the responses. And yes, those are actually, you'll see those directly in the application questions in the system, and it will alert you if you've gone over. But we've really tried to make sure that there's enough space for you to be detailed.
So something that we're doing this year is that we are weighing certain parts of the application. And these percentages reflect what would make an application successful for reviewers. These percentages are noted on the RFP. They are noted on the application questions as well. And the reviewers will know these percentages too. And the final score that they will provide will reflect these weights. So the whole application is really important, but definitely keep these percentages in mind as you go through your application. So for capacity and personnel, this section is all about the individuals who will be working on your project. So the project director has the experience and expertise necessary. The scholar has the relevant qualifications and their role is clearly defined. And everyone else who's working on the team, working on the project as part of the team, they are identified and their role is explained as well as possible. Then the next percentage is the project description, feasibility, and timeline. This is really the crux of your application because this explains what you will actually be doing. So this is where you will provide a clear and detailed description of your project and all the activities. It is clearly connected to DC culture, history, and residents. How the audience will experience your project is clearly outlined. The timeline is feasible and within the grant period. And you describe achievable goals and impacts, as well as how to assess your project success. The next section is all about community collaboration, and this will be 15% of your application. And this is where you will say how you will reach and engage the target audience, how your project will be inclusive, diverse, equitable, and accessible, and any explanation that you can provide for why it might not be inclusive, diverse, equitable, and accessible. Then the last section is the budget. This will be 10% of the application. And this is where you will clearly describe how the funds will be used, and all expenses are directly tied to the proposed project activities. All right. So now I'm going to move to my other screen. All right. So on the grant opportunities page, like I said earlier, this section under applicant resources is where you can find the link to Foundant, our grants portal, as well as the Foundant instructions. So if you click on this, this will provide step-by-step instructions for how to create an account, what you will see once you actually sign up, as well as how to actually submit the application. If you have never worked in Foundant before, please look at these instructions. If you have worked in Foundant before, I encourage you to look again at these instructions. Us on staff are obviously happy to help with Foundant if you have questions, but please take a look at these instructions. If you have submitted an application previously and your organization has, and there is already an account in Foundant, please use the same login information, the same account, to just add another request onto that same account. But if you lost your login information, for example, totally fine. Just contact us on the grants team and we can set you back up. All right. So when you log into Foundant, you will see a dashboard, which is basically a welcome screen, and that will list the 4 funding opportunities available in Cycle 1. This is Visions, so make sure if you want to apply for Visions, you click on Visions. And what you see on my screen now is a little different from what you will see on your screen, but I wanted to show it from this end to show all of the potential sections that you would possibly be looking at. It's totally possible that some of you will indeed see all of these sections, but other sections might not pop up depending on answers to previous questions or what kind of project you actually have. So I'm just going to go section by section. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to just interrupt me or write things into the chat, and then Leia can interrupt me. So the first section is a little bit of further information about the review process. Feel free again to look at our website if you are interested in being a grant reviewer yourself. And then we'll get into applicant information. So again, this is only open to organizations. If you are applying through a fiscal sponsor, you would select organization. Organization is the only option you have here. And then if you have received a grant from Humanities DC previously, you are welcome to add information about that here. This section will not be reviewed by reviewers. This is just for us on staff to look at. And this is where you would provide some more information about the organization, which again, might be the fiscal sponsor. And so this is where you would put the mission statement, how the project will support the organization's mission. Then scrolling down, I'm not going to go through every single question here because a few are pretty self-explanatory. But again, if you have questions, let us know. And going down here is the UEI section. It stands for Unique Entity Identifier. All organizations must have this UEI in order to apply for funding from Humanities DC. Some of you might remember the DUNS number. UEI replaced the DUNS number a few years ago. If you do not have a UEI, it is pretty easy to get one. It is free to get one. And you would go to this link here about more information about the UEI. It takes a few days for you to get your UEI from the government. So make sure to get that process rolling several days before the application deadline, just in case. On our website, we have an FAQ document in that section that I showed you earlier, applicant resources, and more information about UEI is in the FAQ document if you have further questions. And this is where you would note if the organization that's applying is actually serving as a fiscal sponsor. And if you say yes, then this is more information from the fiscal sponsor, and it is about the entity that they are sponsoring. So if an individual is being sponsored, then the individual's information is here, for example. And we also require the fiscal sponsor to send over a letter just saying that they understand what their role is as a fiscal sponsor, that they have agreed to be the fiscal sponsor. And next, going into the first major category, capacity and personnel. Again, this is 30% of the total score. This is where you talk about the expertise of the project director, the community scholar, and any other team members or collaborators. And so the project director would have experience or interest in the topic, professionally or personally. And like I said earlier, they are the driver of the project activities, and they are usually the point of contact as well. So this is just, all their contact information, talking about any relevant work experience that they have. And then the section on team and collaborators, just letting you know you don't necessarily need team members. If you think as a project director, you can do this all on your own with the help of the fiscal sponsor, of course. You don't need other team members, that's okay. But projects typically do benefit from having a partnership. If anything, so the project director doesn't have to do everything by themselves, and you can get a lot more community buy-in by bringing on more people. And then down here is all the information about the scholar, all their contact information, a resume, and a description as to why you think that they're qualified. So you would just describe their qualifications and what kind of role they would have in your project. Next section is the project narrative. Again, this is the section that really describes what your project actually will be, what you will do, when you'll do it, how you will measure success. And in this section especially, but this is the case for all sections, be as detailed as possible. And over here, this is where you would choose a particular discipline that your project falls into. This discipline list reflects the slide earlier in this presentation. We also have this list on our website. If you think that your project is in more than one discipline, totally fine. You would just describe those secondary disciplines throughout the rest of the application. Then here's where you'll note the project type. You can choose one, you can choose several, up to you. And then this is where you would just describe the project summary. It's a pretty short section because this is like the quick and easy way to understand what your project is. We might be using this summary for external purposes. So this is just like a very brief, succinct description of what you hope to do. Next is about the target audience demographics. Feel free to check off any boxes that apply to you and your project. Just be aware that you do not have to have your project be really for everyone all over the entire city. If you think that your project genuinely will focus more, or your audience is going to be a more specific subset of the population, that's totally fine. And then this is where you will describe your activities, and then when you'll do things, when you hope to achieve milestones. And then down here is the connection to the humanities. So we provide a bunch of suggestions for how to approach this kind of question. And this is where you connect your project to the discipline that you selected previously in the application, as well as any secondary or, I guess, tertiary disciplines that you deem appropriate. And then the last question of this section is about measuring success. You define what success means. So if you want a certain number of people attending your film festival, you can put that here and how you will count those people. If you want to do a survey to see how people felt about your exhibit, for example, you would describe all of that here. Next section is community collaboration. So again, this is 15% of your total score, and this is how you will reach out and engage your target audience. So this is how those partners will be able to help with promotion, development funding, and other aspects of the project, as well as who will be your target audience, how you will contact them, how you will engage them, things like that. And like I said earlier, you don't need a final list of partners necessarily, but at least provide thoughtful ideas about who you hope to work with and how you will contact them. The next section is the budget, which again is 10% of your total score. And you would fill out this budget table. So again, the Visions Grant can provide up to $25,000 in funding. You do not have to request the full dollar amount, but you are totally welcome to. And so you would fill out this column for where you hope the funding will go into each specific budget category. And this is the column where you can list other sources of funding for your project. That is definitely not required. If you think that, let's say if you request $25,000 and you think your project will indeed only cost $25,000, that's totally fine. But if you do have other sources of funding, we definitely encourage you to list that here. And now going down the budget categories, honoraria is to cover things like speaker fees, for example. You can think of honoraria as stipends, so like one-off payments, for example. Whereas salaries and wages are for how you will pay the key team members of your project. So that could be the project director, the scholar, key collaborators. You can think of this instead of a stipend like the honoraria is, this is for people who might get like an hourly wage, for example. Next is travel. If you need to have the project scholar travel to DC or around DC, if the project director will do the same thing, anything like that, that would be under travel. Then supplies, it would be supplies or equipment. If your organization differentiates the two, this is where you would put equipment. And these are any like tangible items. So if you want to create a documentary film, for example, this is where you can put the video camera as an example. Next is publicity, promotion, and printing. So this is focused mostly on marketing. If you wanted to hand out flyers, then this could be where you put ink, let's say, for your printers, etc. Next is facilities rental. So if you hope to have an event and you want the event to happen somewhere and you need to pay for space, this is where you would put the dollar amount for the facilities. Then evaluation, if you want to put money aside for any kind of formal evaluations, you can put that down here. As well as other, for any costs that don't fit neatly into any of these other categories. Just be aware that you do not have to put a dollar amount in every single row. It really depends on your project. If you want to put a dollar amount in every row, you are more than welcome to. It's not required. Then down here is a budget narrative, and this is where you explain all of the dollar amounts. And please be detailed here, like I said earlier. All of the dollar amounts, all of the numbers that you provide earlier up here should be reflected down here. If you have more complicated calculations, so like salary, for example, you are welcome, and we definitely encourage you to put the actual equation down here to make it very clear how you actually got to these dollar amounts. And we find that with applicants, It's the budget section that people get the most intimidated by, especially for smaller organizations who might not have done this kind of budgeting, grant writing before. And I want to emphasize that budgets are plans. So you would go with whatever dollar amount, whatever explanation that you have at the time when you actually submit your application. We understand that costs may change over time. Grantees are allowed to redirect funds between budget categories if that happens. Life happens, we understand. So what you put here at the time of submission is going with the best information that you have at that point in time. So please don't worry about the budget. As long as you explain everything clearly, that's good. And then the next section is appendices. So this would be where you would provide any additional supporting documents. We provide some suggestions here, but really, if you think that there's another document that you think would be great to have for the reviewers to understand more about your project and or your organization, you can plop that here. If you do create contracts with potential partners, this is where you would put them, for example. And the next section is accessibility. So this section would pop up if your organization has at least 15 staff members and or you're hosting a public event. And so this section is all about compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA. And we just want to know that you are thinking thoughtfully about how to include people with disabilities in your project. This section is not reviewed by reviewers. This section is reviewed by us on staff at Humanities DC. And even if this section does not pop up for you, so maybe your organization only has 12 people and you will not be doing an event as a result of your project, I do encourage you to still think about accessibility. For example, like how you will communicate your project out to your audience. If you're going to do any films, will that film have captions? Where and how people could find your publication, things like that. And you can think of accessibility as broad as you want. Doesn't have to only be for people with disabilities, but definitely something that we encourage you to be thoughtful about. And then if you are doing a documentary film, this section will pop up. Obviously, throughout the whole application, you would talk about your film, but this section is really very film specific. More details about the film itself and how the public will be able to access the film. And you're welcome to also submit a reel or information about prior work that reflects your documentary filmmaking experience. Then lastly is the signature area. So the authorized person at the organization who is actually submitting the application, this is where you would sign it. And you don't see this on my screen, but on your screen, you'll see at the bottom 2 buttons, one for save and one for submit. I highly encourage you to continuously save your work so you don't lose anything. When you are done with your application and you click save for a final time, and you would like someone on Humanities D staff to review your application, that's what you would do. And like Leah said earlier, you would just email us so we can take a look at your draft. And when you are ready to submit, you would just click submit, and that is it through the system. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and open it up for Q&A. If you have questions about the application or any part of this presentation, I know I threw a lot of information at you, but any questions in the last 10 minutes that we have scheduled for this? Leah, any comments or questions in the chat that would be good for the whole group?
Somebody asked if it's possible to view past successful applications. And I mentioned that we don't publish applications of past applicants, but on our grant opportunities page on the website, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you can see successful grantees from this past year. And, looking at those projects, we give the amount, we give which grant program. So if you're considering other grant programs in addition to Visions, they're all listed there. And then a brief description of the project. And you should be able to Google those projects to kind of find more. Most have some kind of public presence online, especially our Visions grantees. And hopefully that will give you a sense of the project.
And I'll reiterate that we do have office hours available. So as you are moving through your application and you have questions about like how, you are answering the questions, anything like that, you are totally welcome to sign up for office hours to meet with myself or Leah. And also send in the draft application like we've said.
Mm-hmm.
I have a quick question, if we have the time. I just wanted to scratch a little beneath the surface on the DC connection, the importance of the DC connection. So if we are doing like a film festival that is presenting, in our case, investigative films or, international film festival or whatever, and we're presenting these to DC residents, is that enough of a connection, or is it a stronger application if we focus on a particular aspect that is actually like, we were talking about focusing on the use, if you will, of DC humanities experts as speakers at the event. I'm just trying to understand a little bit like what's the sweet spot in terms of how, is it enough that we're serving the DC public with our fare, or is it better to be featuring DC filmmakers, for example, or, I'm just want a little clarity on that.
Yeah, so your application will be strengthened if you have more DC specific connections. You don't necessarily have to have, for like a documentary film festival, it doesn't necessarily have to be utilizing DC filmmakers or anything like that, but like, how will you tell the DC community about it? Like, this festival is happening in their city, so why is it their city? Why not other cities? Like, what kind of DC connection can you create? Maybe like if you end up having like youth speakers to talk about the film, like having youth from like DC public schools and like how you will reach out to them and have them perhaps think about how the film relates to their own lives, for example. So we encourage you to be thoughtful, I guess, about how you want to involve DC residents, and the more connections you have, typically the stronger your application will be.
Great, thank you for clarifying that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and just jump in. I think reviewers are looking for what's the benefit to DC residents, so if it's why is this document? Yeah, I think as Hillary mentioned, why is this documentary film festival being held in DC, and what's the benefit to DC residents specifically?
Great.
We had a question too, must the project director be a DC resident? No, the project director doesn't need to be a DC resident, provided that they're part of an organization that is based in DC. I think that's correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if they like live in Maryland or Virginia, but work for an organization that's in DC, that's okay.
Right.
Any final questions? All right. So again, thank you all so much for being here today. Like I said earlier, this workshop has been recorded. It will be posted on our website soon, alongside the 3 other workshops for the 3 other Cycle 1 grant opportunities. We are continuing to doing info sessions, like I said earlier. If you're interested in learning about all 6 of the opportunities in 2024. And yeah, let us know if you have any further questions. Thank you all for being here and have a great weekend.
Yeah, happy Friday, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.